This podcast and content posted by Dr. Judith Joseph is presented solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from this podcast or website is at the user's own risk. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional diagnoses or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical or mental health condition they may have and should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Mariah Grumet is a certified etiquette trainer, and she puts a modern twist on old school etiquette. On this episode of The Vault, we talk about how many people use social media and text messaging to communicate, but a lot can get lost in translation, which leads to miscommunications and disagreements.
The communication is important because face-to-face communication should not go away. That should not be less prioritized. But I also think the older generation shouldn't be looking at the younger generations thinking that they are rude for communicating a different way. They're not rude. They're just doing the way things work in their world. So the period, if it's like the K, to K someone would be sassy. So apparently if you put a period at the end of the sentence, to that generation, it may be received or perceived that you were being a little bit more stern and serious.
In addition to discussing proper text etiquette, she offers tips to help people to cope with feeling anxious when they are in stressful social situations and how to feel more comfortable in your own skin when you're in a room full of people that you don't know. We talked about how some people with social anxiety and neurodivergent individuals may have a hard time in social settings, and she offers practical tips on how to cope with these situations by using etiquette as a support. Thank you so much for coming into the vault.
I'm so excited to be here, Dr. Judith. I can't even tell you.
Have you ever been in a diamond vault before?
I can't say that I have. This is a first for me, but it's so cool. It's so cool.
Thank you. This is where mental wealth is created. And that people are feeling more isolated than ever, alone. And a lot of times, because of what we went through over the past couple of years, people forgot how to communicate.
Yes.
Or they feel rusty. They feel as if they don't know how to communicate as effectively. And many people during the pandemic who I treat, who have social anxiety, said that their social anxiety actually got better because they didn't have to deal with people, right?
That makes sense.
But then when they went back out into the world, it was like this shock, okay, what do I do now? And people who never had social anxiety are now experiencing this kind of awkwardness.
Right.
And so I think that because mental health issues are becoming way more prevalent because of all the trauma that we've been through collectively, I think that we need to think outside of the box and not just depend on therapists to provide support, because therapy can come in various forms. And tell us a bit about your work and how it can be a form of therapy and support for people who have anxiety.
So as an etiquette coach, we can talk a little bit about what etiquette means to me, but my goal is to empower people and give them the tools they need to go out in the world and feel confident in social situations. And we're all different, so that looks different for everybody, but it's about filling people's tool belt with things that they need to be able to interact with others, to put their best foot forward, and really put forth that best version of themselves.
I was listening to a podcast recently. I can't remember who the person was, but there were all these little tips in there, that I started to practice as a therapist. I'm someone who thinks about people's behavior, their thoughts all day long. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to learn that. One of the things was when you're talking, use your hands, because when people can see your hands, they trust you more.
Yes.
What are some of those other tools in terms of body language that we don't really think about?
I think eye contact is huge, right? Connecting with people. We all have different forms of communication. We speak with our words, we speak with our bodies, and so the hands is a great one. Another one is we don't really think about often the way we walk into a room, how we enter a room. Our walk is oftentimes part of our first impression because it's within those first few seconds of being in someone's presence. So being able to walk confidently with strong posture, that communicates a lot of confidence, a lot of self-assurance. Also in the way that we stand when we speak to people. We should be greeting people head on, shoulder to shoulder. But again, just really keeping that open body language to ensure that the way we communicate with our bodies supports the words that we have to say as well.
Those are also key. And I remember learning about that when I went to business school a couple of years ago. I won't date myself, but I just remember thinking, why didn't I learn this in medical school? Because I was in this MD, MBA program where I hopped between medical school and business school around different people. And something that doctors are taught. It's called bedside manner.
Yes.
And it's about how to be warm, empathic, non-judgmental. But we don't learn those other things like, patients who are going into surgery, they want to know that you know what you're doing, right? So confidence is really important. Eye contact is really important. Even that handshake is so important in the way that you shake their hand. Yes. I can't tell you how many times I've been in the room with nervous doctors and they were like, well, it'll be okay. And it's like, I don't think you're convincing.
What message are you conveying with that form of body language, right?
But in business school, the opposite. It was like, when you enter that room, you do this. When you're at that dinner table, you do this. And you do this because they know that means that you may get a deal that's millions, billions of dollars, or lose a deal that's millions, billions of dollars. Now, we were talking earlier about neurodivergence. Mm-hmm. And how a lot of the tips that you provide are really useful for people who are neurotypical.
Yes.
But when people have identify as being neurodivergent, may have autistic traits or live with autistic traits or live with ADHD, many times they feel as if they are masking or they are being told to fit into a box that contains them when they're provided these tips. However, you could take it either way. And I know you get a lot of comments about this.
Yes, I do. And when it comes to etiquette, everything that I do is to empower people, right? I'm not here to change someone or put someone in a box. And I also work really hard to kind of redefine what etiquette is about. And I think that the conversation around people who identify as neurodivergent and putting together these body language signals and the way that we communicate, that was never something that people thought about when they thought about etiquette, right? It was about setting a table or the order to do things or who opens the door for who. But really, when you think about what etiquette is, it's all about putting the needs of others before ours, and living intentionally and really thinking before we do things. And so for someone who may be or may identify as neurodivergent, it may require a little bit more practice, just as any skill does, right? Some people are born with being able to walk into a room and connect with anybody, and that's a skill for them. But it's not for everybody. So the same way as if you wanted to play a sport, you wouldn't just pick up that sport and expect to be really good at it. And so sometimes, even though it sounds simple to some, it's not so simple to look at someone in the eye for someone who's neurodivergent. And so you may need to rely on friends or family members or to role play, to practice, so that when you do find yourself in a professional situation or social situation, you've put in the work and you feel a little bit more confident knowing that, or more at ease, even more at ease knowing that you've prepared for this. For people that it doesn't come as naturally for them. The preparation is important.
That's true. And, two things can be true. You don't have to necessarily abandon who you are to communicate differently. And it's not to say that by trying these tools, you're trying to mask or change. You're trying to communicate and be empathic, mirroring or hoping to mirror that the other person will say, oh, I want to meet you where you are too. Yes. It's a tool. You can take it or leave it. It's not bad. It's not good.
Absolutely.
It is what it is.
And I also think that people aren't mind readers, right? And we always want to show up as the best version of ourselves. And that looks different for everybody. So if for someone who may struggle to communicate with their bodies, may need to rely on their words a little bit more to say, I'm listening to you, if eye contact is a struggle. And so I think it's etiquette, yes, is a broad term, and it's about being caring and about respecting others. But I think when we look at it from an individual standpoint, you have to learn different skills and use different resources that work for you. Everybody is different. And so a lot of my work is about kind of pulling out that individuality and what makes them shine and allowing people to see that, because people aren't mind readers. They don't know what you're trying to communicate. And so that's why, working together with our words and our bodies and our tone, those three things, they need to work together and not against each other.
So, we talked about social anxiety, and there are many people who have to go to big events. Mm-hmm. They may have to meet new people for the first time, or they have big presentations. What are ways that people can use your skills to feel supported in these new, scary situations?
So I sound like a broken record, but preparation is key. And the preparation can look as simple as taking a notebook and jotting down some things that you're really good at speaking about. That way, when someone asks you a question, it's already at the front of your brain because you've taken a little bit of time to prepare. Read up on current events, non-controversial current events for social events. Brush up on some, knowledge of hobbies that you have or things going on in your community, so that they all sit at the front of your brain, so that when you do go go to meet somebody new or go to that big event, you feel a little bit more prepared and you don't have to kind of dig for things to answer or things to talk about, and come up with a few topics of conversation that you can ask other people. Like I said, networking, interacting with people, it's a sport like basketball, like swimming. It takes preparation. And so that's very important. I also think at an event like that, doing things like keeping your phone away to keep your body language open, staying at the center of the room. And sometimes it's a mindset shift, as in, I like to tell my clients to think, what if? Or to think, who knows who I may meet? What if I meet someone that can connect me to a really big opportunity? What if I can help someone with something? And so sometimes that mindset shift of, okay, I have 2 hours to just put myself out there. This might suck. This might be really difficult, but I've prepared myself, and you never know what could come of it. So it's the preparation, the mindset shift, and then keeping your body language open and your conversation prepared for when you're really there.
What you're explaining is exposure therapy. So
Yes.
in my field, the more your brain is aware of what to expect, the less anxious you feel, because it's not a new thing. And the human brain is terrified when it doesn't know what's coming down the pipeline, right?
Yes.
So these are all forms of exposure therapy. I also treat a lot of people with depression, both high functioning and low functioning depression. And many times people are going back to work, or they're going into situations where they don't feel confident. One of the symptoms of depression is feeling bad about yourself, feeling guilty, feeling hopeless. How can people start to put forward this face of confidence, even though inside they don't feel confident? Maybe they have imposter syndrome. What are ways to look confident when you enter a room?
I don't love the whole fake it till you make it thing, because I don't think our society needs any more inauthenticity at all. But, in terms of the way that we perceive people, a lot of that has to do with outer appearance. And it's not because we're judgmental. It's just because it takes 7 seconds to form a first impression for someone. So our brain, our brain has no choice but to judge someone on their outer appearance. And so I like to think of it, or to tell my clients, think of your outward appearance as a movie trailer. People don't have the time, or they literally don't have the time to get to know who you are on the inside and all of the incredible things you have to offer. And so when you're looking to appear more confident, don't only think about the way you're dressing or the way your hair looks or anything like that, but it's your presence, right? It's the way you're holding your body when you walk into a room. So when you enter a room, do you have your head in your phone? You're chaotic from the energy. Your energy's chaotic from wherever you were before. There's things flying out of your handbag. Or do you take a moment and you walk into a room with strong posture? You make eye contact, or at least acknowledge the people in the room. Smile. Give people the movie trailer, because you have so many incredible things to offer on the inside, and you want people to be able to feel that trust and feel your energy from the beginning. And so I think confidence is a lot about energy. And so if you can work to channel that confident, positive energy, despite how you may be feeling on the inside, it'll start to connect.
And it's not just about letting this first impression ruin your life, right?
No,
I did so many reels on this, where it's called the mental status exam in psychiatry. So the mental status exam is a real part of the psychiatric evaluation, where the therapist looks at your eye contact. They look at the way you walk. They look at the way you sit. They listen to your tone of voice. I mean, just about anything that is verbal and nonverbal, they will write in this paragraph. And it informs a diagnosis. It doesn't make a diagnosis. It informs it. So we're not saying that okay, you only have one chance, but we are very realistic that people formulate their opinions within the first couple of minutes, right?
And not because they mean to.
Right.
It's because you can support me in that. That's the way our brains work. So it's when we have that knowledge, it empowers us to say, well, we may have a little bit more control over this narrative. We can't necessarily control how people perceive us, but we can control what we put out there.
Especially for really high stress situations like a job interview,
yes,
like meeting someone important for the first time, a first date. These are situations where we all have these catastrophizing scenarios.
Yes.
This is one more way to feel more confident, secure, less anxious in a situation. Exactly. We're not saying fake it all the time.
No. It's more so too about, I keep saying, but every person is incredible and has so much to offer and is unique, and you're the only one who can bring that out. You're the only one who can show people who you really are. You have that control. And I want people to be empowered to shine their light, because when we shine our light and we walk with confidence, you don't know who else you're inspiring to do the same.
And etiquette is something that we don't necessarily think of these days, because I think when people think about it, they think that it's this way of life that has passed, that's traditional. However, I'm starting to see more and more interest in this area. Why do you think that is?
I think because we're starting to redefine the idea of it, that, if you look at etiquette books from years and years and years ago, it was a way of formal traditional living. But etiquette evolved and continues to evolve as our world does. So you're not going to find any information in an etiquette book from the 1940s about email and text etiquette, right? We have to create new guidelines and ways to live based on how our world is changing. And etiquette may, in the past, it may have been there to tell people how to do things a certain way, but I look at it as just a fancy word for social awareness. And so social awareness, especially nowadays, is so, so important. Knowing how to connect with people and respect people. It's something that provides civility in our society and helps us move in a peaceful way.
I was recently at this event at Columbia, and it was a women's event. And we sat in this room, and it was like intergenerational. There's so many different generations present, including students. So you had Gen Z all the way to boomers, right? And one woman stood up and she asked this question. She said, I just want to know how to talk to the younger people in my family. I just find that I want to talk to them face to face, but they want to text, and that's rude, and da-da-da. And there was a person from Gen Z who stood up and she said, it's not rude. That's just how we communicate. And I just thought that was such a moment. Yes. And maybe there needs to be some reverse of generations, like younger generations need to teach older generations text etiquette, because, one person may perceive one thing over text, the other person doesn't. And I just recently learned that periods are a big thing.
That's sassy, right? You put a period. That's sassy. I really respect where that individual was coming from, because I think that there is this journey, and part of my work does this, especially in the business world, to sort of have these generations meet halfway, to respect the way that things were done or are being done, in each generation. And then how do we meet halfway to really show that respect? So yes.
So help me with that one. Yes. Help me with that. Because I'm not Gen Z, clearly. What is that about? The period is rude? How to explain that to me?
I mean, I don't think it is. I think it's just grammar, right? But I definitely, my younger brother and his friends might think differently. But, I think that the communication is important, because face-to-face communication should not go away. That should not be less prioritized. But I also think the older generation shouldn't be looking at the younger generations thinking that they are rude for communicating a different way, because they're not rude. They're just, like you said, they're just doing what they were taught, what the way things work in their world. So the period, if it's like the K, someone would be sassy. So apparently if you put a period at the end of the sentence, to that generation, it may be received or perceived that you were being a little bit more stern and serious.
Well, I think there needs to be a whole book on text message etiquette, because I'm lost. Please let that be your third book.
I'll work on that.
And, I always ask my experts about a time in their lives when on the outside, everything was put together. The etiquette was on point. But on the inside, things weren't. And everyone thought oh, she has it figured out. We don't have to worry about her. But you actually knew that it was different, that you were struggling. Yeah. And how did you get through that?
So it's funny. I think at one stage of my life, I guess it was 2022, January of 2022, or December of 21, January 2022. I had just left my very secure corporate job in the fashion industry to pursue this silly little dream that I didn't know what was, where it was going to go. And I didn't leave my job in a place where I could. I wasn't, it's not like this business was taking off. So I took a huge risk, quit my job, and I started trying to grow my business. And at the same time, I lost 3 people very close to me. And I had no idea where my life was going. My family life was kind of, falling apart because we were all just trying to stay afloat. We lost my grandmother to COVID. We lost my childhood dog. We lost my very close neighbor to COVID 6 weeks after my grandmother. So it was a really dark year. But while that was going on, my business started soaring. It started taking off. And so to the outside world, because I wasn't sharing these things on social media, it was, oh, she's doing great. She's seeing so much success. This must be such an incredible time in her life, when really my personal life was really, really struggling. And I think that, the way I got over it was, I seeked out therapy afterwards to have help, to learn how to cope with major grief. That's not something that I had experienced in my life, thank goodness, before that. So, I'm a firm believer in that. I'm one of those people that like to do everything. I like to wear a lot of hats. I like to think I can do everything. But it taught me a lot about, outsourcing, to lean on other experts in different fields to help you get through something. And so it also taught me that, like we said before, two things can be true at the same time. And that was very difficult for me at the time to navigate. How can my personal life be crumbling and my business be soaring? How do I balance that? But I think that our mess is our message, and that's something I firmly believe in. And it taught me a lot about my resilience, and it taught me a lot about how I want to continue to connect with people in my line of work and take this idea of etiquette way beyond the surface level definition that many people think of it as.
I mean, I'm so sorry for your losses.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And thank you for sharing your story, because I think people do see everything put together on the outside, and they don't realize that you have to check on your strong friends, right?
Yes.
Where can we find you, your books, and follow you?
Thank you. So I am all over social media. My business is called Old Soul Etiquette. So Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Old Soul Etiquette. And my website is oldsouletIquette.com. And my book is called What Do I Do? Every Wedding Etiquette Question Answered, wherever you enjoy purchasing books.
I need to read that. You don't want to eat dinner with me. You're like, who taught her etiquette? Thank you so much for coming on to the show and for entering the vault.